He had been attending talent showcases for years, sitting in the same chair near the middle of the hall, notebook in hand, always ready to judge, critique, and analyze. He had seen performers of all kinds, people who dazzled with confidence, people who stumbled through their moments on stage, and people who seemed entirely unprepared yet somehow surprised everyone. But he had learned to rely on instinct. First impressions mattered, and when he first saw her, he had that instant, familiar judgment that came without conscious thought. She stood at the far end of the stage, alone, quiet, her hands lightly brushing against her bag. Her clothes were simple, not flashy, not designed to draw attention. Her shoes were plain, worn from what looked like years of use, and her hair was tied back in a practical way. There was nothing about her that screamed extraordinary talent. To anyone glancing quickly in her direction, she didn't carry herself with any particular arrogance or grandeur. In fact, she seemed almost nervous, but not in an obvious way, more like a calm tension underneath a gentle smile. Round her, the room buzzed with chatter. Families, friends, and other participants filled the seats, their conversations blending into a low hum of excitement and expectation. People leaned forward, whispering guesses about the next performer. She didn't seem to care about the whispers or the stares. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She simply stood there, holding a small piece of paper, most likely her sheet music, and waited. He watched her with a critical eye, the kind that had made him both respected and feared in the music community. He had learned to spot talent quickly. Some people came on stage and their energy alone revealed their potential. Others, he thought, were simply dreamers, people hoping that confidence could replace skill. He had seen too many like her, quiet, unassuming individuals who were either hopelessly unprepared or simply average. He shifted slightly in his seat, a gesture unnoticed by anyone, but habitual for him when assessing a performer. The organizer called her name, and she walked toward the piano. Her steps were measured, deliberate. She didn't rush. She didn't stumble. It was a simple walk, nothing dramatic, yet somehow she commanded attention, not through force, but through a quiet certainty that some people possess, the kind that suggests they know their place in the world even if the world hasn't recognized it yet. The piano itself was a beautiful instrument, polished and gleaming under the stage lights. Most performers approached it with a sense of ceremony, running their hands over the keys in a subtle display of familiarity or dominance. She didn't do any of that. She approached the piano as if greeting an old friend. Her hands hovered briefly above the keys before settling naturally, almost gently, on the familiar surface. Her posture was relaxed, yet every movement was purposeful. He leaned back in his chair, pen hovering over his notebook. "This will be quick," he muttered to himself. He had already formed his opinion. There was nothing in her appearance, nothing in her demeanor, that suggested she could be remarkable. He was convinced that within the first 30 seconds, he would have material for his review. He would nod, scribble a few notes about how appearances can be misleading, and move on. Around him, the audience shifted in their seats. Some were curious, some seemed doubtful. There is always a certain tension when a performer approaches the stage without a reputation, without awards, without accolades. The unknown can be thrilling or disappointing. Most were leaning toward disappointment in her case. There was nothing flashy about her, no dramatic flair, no loud clothing, no confident strides. She didn't look like the kind of person who could make hearts stop and applause erupt. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if drawing in a deep breath from the room itself. The audience didn't notice, but anyone who paid attention could see the calm energy radiating from her. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't false bravado. It was quiet self-assurance, the kind that comes from years of practice done not for recognition, not for applause, but for the love of music itself. He shifted again, trying to see if there was any hint of hesitation, any sign of nervousness. But she moved with precision, even as her fingers hovered just above the keys. There was nothing careless about her posture. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance around the room. She was entirely focused on the piano, on the music she was about to create. The first note hadn't even sounded yet, but already he felt a strange tension in the air. Not the kind that comes from excitement, but the subtle, unexplainable tension that happens when something ordinary is about to become extraordinary. He dismissed the feeling immediately. He had felt it before, too many times, only to be proven right. Appearances mattered, and most people who looked unprepared were indeed unprepared. She placed her hands lightly on the keys, not dramatically, not with showmanship, but as if acknowledging the instrument, the stage, the audience, and most importantly, herself. She didn't glance at him. She didn't glance at anyone. She didn't need validation. And in that moment, the critic, the veteran of countless performances, realized that he didn't truly know what to expect. There was a quiet murmur from the audience as she began her performance. It was almost imperceptible at first, a soft note that could have been mistaken for a warming of the instrument. People shifted in their seats, some leaning closer, trying to hear more clearly. The first note resonated in the hall, not loud, not overwhelming, but clear and precise. It wasn't a showy start. It was a deliberate start. He continued to watch, his pen now idle. Something in the room had changed, though he couldn't yet identify it. It wasn't magic. It wasn't dramatic energy. It was something subtle, something almost invisible if one wasn't paying attention. And yet, it was powerful. Her fingers moved with purpose, her hands forming shapes and patterns that suggested both discipline and passion. Around him, the audience was beginning to lean in. Conversations had stopped. Phones were lowered. People were listening, fully engaged, even though nothing remarkable had yet occurred. It was as if the air itself had shifted, holding its breath, waiting for whatever was about to unfold. He shook his head slightly, trying to shake off the feeling. He had been wrong before. He had been fooled before. But he trusted his instincts. And yet, he couldn't deny that something was different about her. There was an energy in the room that defied explanation. He scribbled in his notebook not because he wanted to, but because it was the only thing that felt natural. He wrote notes about posture, about timing, about the beginnings of something that might matter. She didn't look at the audience. She didn't look at him. She didn't look anywhere but the keys. But somehow, everyone in the room was aware of her, not because she demanded attention, but because the music demanded it. Even before it had fully begun, it was clear that this was not going to be ordinary. The quiet confidence she carried, the calm precision in her movements, the subtle energy of focus, it all suggested something deeper, something that no one in the audience, not even the most experienced critic, had fully grasped yet. He leaned forward slightly in his chair, a gesture rare for him. It was almost imperceptible, but it revealed a shift in his own perception. He had underestimated her. He couldn't yet say how or why. There was still nothing dramatic, still nothing flashy. And yet, in the quiet way she held herself, in the gentle precision of her hands on the keys, in the almost invisible energy she radiated, he felt the beginnings of a doubt. And doubt, for someone like him, was unusual. He had rarely been uncertain about a performer. Rarely had he felt that initial judgment, formed in mere seconds, might be completely wrong. But now, as he watched her prepare to play, he realized that appearances were deceiving. He had assumed, based on a glance, that she was ordinary. He had assumed that she would not impress, and he had been completely confident in that assumption. The stage lights reflected softly off the piano. The audience held their breath, and she placed her fingers lightly on the keys. He felt a strange, almost electric tension in the air, though he could not explain why. He had been attending these events for decades. He had seen brilliance, he had seen disappointment, and he had seen mediocrity disguised as promise. And yet, in this quiet, unassuming woman, standing alone with her simple sheet of music and her calm smile, he sensed that something entirely unexpected was about to happen. He still did not know what that would be, but for the first time in a long time, he felt uncertain. And in that moment, uncertainty was the most interesting thing he had experienced in years. She took a slow, deep breath, feeling the cool air of the auditorium brush against her face. The moment had arrived. All those hours she had spent practicing in a small, dimly lit room, the countless evenings when no one had watched, the moments when her fingers had bled, and her heart had ached from frustration, it all led to this very instant. She placed her hands lightly on the keys, and the room seemed to hold its breath with her. The first note rang out, soft but confident. It didn't shout for attention. It simply existed, clear and precise, as if it had always belonged in that space. The audience leaned forward instinctively, drawn by the simplicity of the sound, the subtle warmth that carried through the hall. Some faces remained skeptical, unsure if this soft beginning would lead anywhere, but others felt the first stirrings of curiosity, the tiny thrill that something unexpected might unfold. She closed her eyes, letting her body relax into the rhythm she had internalized for years. Her fingers moved carefully, yet naturally, over the keys, producing sounds that were delicate, yet exact. Every note was deliberate, every pause intentional. She didn't rush. She didn't show off. She didn't need to. Her music spoke for her, quietly but with undeniable authority. From his seat, he watched her closely, still holding his notebook but now writing slower. Something was happening that he could not explain. The notes were not just correct. They carried emotion, depth, and precision all at once. There was a subtlety in her performance that caught him off guard. He had underestimated her, he realized, and a flicker of surprise crossed his face. For the first time in decades of watching performers, he felt genuinely unsure of how to assess what he was seeing. The room grew quieter as her fingers continued to dance across the keys. There was no dramatic flourish yet, no powerful crescendo, but a kind of magic seemed to be weaving itself quietly through the hall. People who had come expecting ordinary talent found themselves holding their breath. Some parents pressed a hand to their chest, sensing the careful emotion behind each note. A few younger audience members whispered to themselves, their eyes wide with wonder, feeling the music reach a part of them they hadn't known existed. She had chosen a piece that, on paper, looked simple, something accessible, not overly complicated, but her interpretation elevated it. Each chord, each pause, each transition was thoughtful. She played with intention, almost as if telling a story without words. It wasn't just notes on a page. It was a conversation, a confession, a reflection of all she had experienced and all she had kept inside. From the side of the stage, the organizers exchanged quiet glances. They had seen many performers, but there was something unique about her presence, something that could not be taught or faked. She had a quiet confidence that did not seek approval, but naturally commanded respect. One of them whispered, almost to themselves, that they had never felt music move a room this way before, especially not in someone so young and unassuming. He noticed it too, the way she moved, the way her fingers seemed to hover effortlessly above the keys before striking them, the way her body seemed to breathe with the rhythm. All of it suggested someone who was not just trained, but deeply connected to the music itself. His pen, which had been poised to critique, now hung idle. He found himself leaning forward in his seat, watching every movement, every subtle gesture, every delicate touch of the piano keys. The audience's skepticism began to fade. Murmurs of doubt turned into quiet gasps of admiration. The soft note of a single key seemed to echo far beyond the instrument, reaching the corners of the hall and even beyond, as if carrying a secret message only some could understand. She didn't glance at anyone. She didn't need validation. She didn't seek applause. The music itself seemed to command attention, and slowly, everyone began to realize it. As the piece unfolded, it became clear that she was not merely playing what was written. She added nuances, small variations, subtle dynamics that brought the music to life. She played with a sense of timing that made each note feel deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. Her performance was not about speed, power, or technical showmanship. It was about connection, the kind of connection that makes a person pause, take notice, and feel something profound without words. He had seen many technical performances before, flawless and precise, yet somehow lifeless. But this was different. She combined technical skill with emotion, precision with passion, simplicity with complexity. It was as if the music itself was alive, moving through her fingers and into the room. He scribbled in his notebook not notes of critique, but phrases like unexpected depth. Emotion speaks through skill, and cannot judge by appearances. Even he, a man of experience and expertise, felt caught in a rare moment of wonder. The audience could not look away, even those who had arrived skeptical, rolling their eyes at the thought of another mediocre performance, were now completely captivated. Some were leaning forward, some had their hands covering their mouths, others had their eyes closed, fully immersed. You could hear the soft sighs of appreciation, the almost inaudible exchanges of disbelief. It was not loud applause yet, but the room vibrated with the quiet recognition that something extraordinary was happening. She didn't allow herself to be distracted by the reaction. Her focus remained on the piano. Her fingers traced each key as if listening to their voice, allowing them to speak through her. She didn't rush. She didn't linger unnecessarily. Each note found its place naturally, guided by intuition as much as by practice. The beauty of her performance was in its subtlety. No single note dominated, yet together they formed a tapestry that enveloped everyone present. He noticed how her posture remained steady, her shoulders relaxed, her head slightly bent in concentration. She seemed entirely comfortable in her skin, entirely connected to the moment. She did not perform for approval, nor for recognition. She performed because it was part of her, because it was an expression of who she was, and in doing so, she was capturing the attention and hearts of everyone in the room, even the most experienced critics. A young boy in the audience, perhaps no older than 10, leaned forward, his small hands gripping the edge of his seat. He whispered to his mother that he had never heard anything so beautiful. A woman sitting nearby wiped a tear from her eye, not out of sadness, but because something in her heart resonated with the emotions carried in the music. Every individual felt the impact in their own way, yet all were united in their silent awe. Even the janitors and backstage staff, who usually worked in the shadows, paused to watch. She had a presence that was quiet, but undeniable. She was not loud, she did not demand attention, yet she could not be ignored. The hall had changed since she had walked onto the stage, and every person present sensed it, whether consciously or not. As she continued, the complexity of the piece became apparent. What had started as a simple melody began to evolve, weaving in subtle harmonies, gentle rises and falls, variations that were both intricate and natural. She was not showing off. She was not trying to impress. She was speaking through the piano, telling a story without words. And the story she told was powerful, moving, and unforgettable. He watched her hands, noting the precision, the elegance, the care with which she pressed each key. He noticed the way her fingers seemed to glide effortlessly, yet every movement was intentional. She was a master of control, yet every note carried warmth and life. It was not just music. It was a conversation, a journey, a reflection of emotion and experience that transcended her physical form. The audience leaned forward as she reached a particularly delicate passage. The notes floated in the air, suspended, delicate yet full of expression. People held their breath, aware that something special was happening, but unable to articulate why. Some faces lit up with recognition, others with awe. Even those who had doubted her found themselves captivated, their initial skepticism replaced by admiration and wonder. He felt something shift within him. His earlier assumptions, the ones formed within seconds of seeing her, were gone. They had been replaced by something new, respect, awe, and an understanding that he had been wrong to judge. This was not a performer to be dismissed. This was someone rare, someone who had taken a simple stage and transformed it into a place of beauty, emotion, and power. She did not falter. She did not hesitate. She played as if the piano and the music itself were extensions of her being. Every note mattered, every pause carried meaning, and every movement was part of a larger story unfolding in real time. She was fully present, fully engaged, and fully herself. And in doing so, she captured the hearts of everyone in the room. By the time she reached the midpoint of her performance, it was clear that she had changed the atmosphere completely. The quiet, skeptical room had become a place of collective attention, of silent awe, of shared experience. She had not just performed, she had connected. She had reached each person in a unique and personal way, and still, she did not look up. She did not acknowledge the audience. She simply continued to play, letting the music speak for her. Even he, sitting in his usual critical position, could not look away. He had spent decades evaluating talent, yet he had never felt quite like this. The music was precise, technical, and skilled, yet it was alive. It was human. It was real. It was impossible to dismiss or reduce to simple critique. As she continued to play, the music seemed to take on a life of its own. It was no longer just a performance, it had become a story unfolding in real time. Each note a word, each chord a sentence, each pause a breath in the narrative. The audience was caught in a delicate spell, drawn into the ebb and flow of the sound. People leaned closer, forgetting everything else, as if the piano itself had created an invisible thread connecting them all to her. She didn't rush. She didn't try to impress. She played as if she were speaking directly to the room, not demanding attention, but inviting it. Each movement of her fingers, each subtle shift of her posture, seemed perfectly in sync with the music. She was in control, yet effortless. It was as if she had been born to play this piano in this moment, as though all the years of practice and quiet dedication had led to this single point in time. From his seat, he watched her in complete silence, his notebook forgotten. He had attended countless performances, seen prodigies and virtuosos, yet this was different. There was an authenticity in her playing that he had rarely witnessed. It was more than technical skill. It was honesty, vulnerability, and confidence all at once. He felt a lump in his throat, the kind that comes when something unexpected pierces your expectations and leaves you momentarily speechless. The room itself seemed to respond. The lighting, the soft hum of the audience, even the gentle creaks of the old wooden floor beneath the stage faded into the background. Nothing mattered except the sound and the presence of the young woman who had somehow transformed the ordinary space into a sanctuary of music. People's eyes glistened, Some had tears quietly running down their cheeks, though they did not move. It was not sadness that touched them, it was recognition, awe, and connection. She moved into a more complex section of the piece, her hands flying across the keys with a skill that was mesmerizing. She was not just playing notes, she was sculpting sound. She created layers of emotion, subtle harmonies that intertwined, rose, and fell, and delicate variations that gave the piece new life with each measure. The music was alive, dynamic, and intimate all at once. She was no longer just a performer, she was a storyteller, and the piano was her voice. Even those who had been skeptical from the beginning could no longer deny what they were witnessing. People shifted in their seats, eyes wide with disbelief and admiration. They whispered to themselves, not wanting to disturb the magic, but needing to acknowledge that what they were hearing was extraordinary. Some parents held their children closer, feeling the shared experience of witnessing something rare. Some young adults, who had come to the hall expecting a simple showcase, sat frozen, mesmerized, fully aware that they were seeing something memorable. He tried to understand how she could produce such emotion with such precision. Her fingers seemed to have a mind of their own, yet every movement was intentional. She combined technical mastery with intuition, speed with sensitivity, complexity with clarity. It was a balance he had studied in others, but rarely seen executed so flawlessly. He scribbled in his notebook, phrases that were more personal than professional, breathtaking control, emotion without exaggeration, impossible to dismiss. He paused, then wrote again, underestimated completely. She transitioned into a passage that required not just skill, but courage. The notes were intricate and fast, yet she played them with a fluidity that made it appear effortless. The audience leaned forward in collective anticipation, recognizing the difficulty and marveling at her ease. It was not flashy, it was not showy, but it was undeniably impressive. Every subtle movement of her wrists, every careful placement of her fingers, demonstrated a mastery that had been earned, not given. Even the older members of the audience, those who had grown up attending countless concerts, were captivated. They whispered to each other in disbelief, unable to contain the wonder that had filled the room. "How can someone so young play like that?" one asked quietly. "I don't know," the other replied, "but it's like the music comes from her soul, not just her hands." She didn't glance at anyone. She didn't need validation or praise. Her focus was absolute. Her body seemed to breathe with the rhythm. Her shoulders relaxed, her head slightly bent in concentration. It was as if she and the piano had become one entity, and the audience was merely lucky enough to witness the union. Every note was alive, resonating through the room with clarity and emotion. He noticed the subtle expressions on her face, tiny shifts in her eyebrows, slight movements of her lips as if each note carried its own story. There was no exaggeration, no unnecessary drama, only sincerity. The depth of feeling she conveyed was unlike anything he had expected from someone so quiet and unassuming. He felt a stirring in his chest, a mix of admiration, humility, and awe. For the first time in a long time, he realized that judgment based on appearances could be entirely wrong. The middle section of the piece built slowly, a crescendo of emotion that did not overwhelm, but lifted the audience gently, guiding them through a landscape of sound. Each chord struck with precision, each pause held meaning, each transition flowed naturally. She had mastered not just the mechanics of playing, but the art of communication. The music was not just heard, it was felt. It touched memories, emotions, and unspoken thoughts in every listener. A young man sitting near the front had tears quietly rolling down his cheeks. Though he tried to hide it, he whispered under his breath, "I've never heard anything like this." Across the aisle, an older woman held her hands together, her eyes glistening, feeling the story unfold in her heart. Even those who had come to critique, to analyze, to compare, found themselves utterly silent, absorbed entirely by the performance. She shifted to a softer section, allowing the notes to linger in the air. The room seemed to exhale with her, as if everyone was holding their breath along with the music. There was a subtle power in the quiet moments, an intimacy that made the audience feel personally connected to the sound. She did not demand attention. She earned it effortlessly through authenticity and skill. He realized that her performance was more than just playing a piece. It was a reflection of her journeyers of dedication, of quiet practice, of struggle and perseverance. Every note carried a weight of experience, a depth of emotion, and a sincerity that could not be fabricated. He felt an unexpected admiration not just for her skill, but for her courage and commitment. She had taken a risk standing on that stage, and now the risk had transformed into a moment of undeniable brilliance. The music rose again, more intricate, more expressive. Her fingers moved with a speed and accuracy that seemed impossible, yet every note was clear, every phrase perfectly shaped. The audience leaned in, caught in the current of sound, experiencing the ebb and flow of emotion that she so naturally created. People exchanged glances, silent acknowledgments that something extraordinary was occurring. Even those who had initially dismissed her were now fully engaged. He caught glimpses of faces that had been skeptical, now wide-eyed and transfixed. He noticed subtle nods of approval, quiet murmurs of astonishment, and the occasional soft exclamation of delight. The young woman had captured their attention not through spectacle or drama, but through the sheer beauty and authenticity of her music. He felt this sense of humility. He had underestimated her, as he admitted silently, and the realization was both humbling and invigorating. He had been wrong, and he could not ignore it. She was not just talented, she was extraordinary. Her performance was a rare combination of technical mastery, emotional depth, and authenticity. It was the kind of talent that left a lasting impression, a memory that would linger long after the final note. As the piece reached its climax, the room was silent except for the music. Each note resonated with clarity and precision, yet carried emotion and warmth. The audience sat in rapt attention, caught between admiration and awe. Even the youngest children were quiet, sensing the significance of the moment without fully understanding it. She had created an atmosphere where every individual felt a personal connection to the music, yet the experience was shared collectively. She ended the climax with a subtle, lingering chord, allowing it to resonate fully in the hall. There was a pause, long enough for the audience to absorb the weight of what they had just heard, but not so long as to break the spell. It was a delicate, masterful touch, one that demonstrated her understanding not just of notes, but of timing, emotion, and audience perception. He could feel the collective anticipation in the room. Everyone had been drawn in, held in suspense by the sheer beauty of the performance. And in that moment, he realized something important. He had witnessed not just a performance, but an awakening. She had awakened something in everyone present, the recognition that talent cannot be judged by appearances, the understanding that passion and dedication speak louder than confidence or fame, and the reminder that true artistry is experienced with the heart, not just the eyes. She prepared for the next section, her hands hovering lightly over the keys. There was no hesitation, no doubt. She had captured the audience, earned their attention, and now she continued her story. The music was no longer just her own, it belonged to the room, shared with everyone present. Each note was a gift, each phrase an invitation to feel, to reflect, to connect. The music filled the hall like a living thing. Every note she played seemed to ripple outward, touching every listener in a way that went beyond hearing. People didn't just listen, they felt. Each chord carried an emotion so real, so tangible, that it seemed to bypass thought entirely. The audience had moved past admiration. They were experiencing something rare, something that reached deep into the heart. She leaned slightly into the piano, her fingers gliding effortlessly across the keys. The melody shifted, softening and then rising, taking the audience on a journey they had not anticipated. The complexity of the piece was breathtaking. It was intricate, layered, and yet completely natural. She played not for applause or recognition, but because the music existed inside her. She had become one with it, and the hall had become one with her. From his seat, he could barely write. His notebook remained open, pen idle, as he watched in awe. He had seen many talented performers, yet he had rarely felt the weight of a performance in his chest. The way her music seemed to pulse through the room. He realized that he had underestimated her completely, and the realization brought with it a strange mix of humility and admiration. He could not take his eyes off her. People were leaning forward in their seats, their eyes wide, their attention captured completely. Parents held their children close, as if protecting them from the intensity of what they were feeling. Young adults, who had come expecting something ordinary, were frozen, caught in the flow of the music. Even the older members of the audience, those with decades of experience attending concerts and performances, were silent, completely absorbed. Unable to look away, she shifted into a faster, more energetic passage. The notes came quicker now, flowing like a river, yet never losing clarity or precision. Her hands moved with a grace that was mesmerizing, a combination of strength and delicacy that left the audience in awe. It was impossible to tell where skill ended and instinct began. She was not performing for anyone but herself, yet everyone in the room felt included in the experience. He noticed the subtle nuances in her performance, the gentle lifting of a hand here, a delicate pause there, a shift in pressure that made the sound warmer or sharper. It was not just technical mastery, it was artistry. She understood the music in a way that went far beyond notes on a page. She was speaking through the piano, telling a story without words, and the audience was hanging on every phrase. The room was completely silent now, except for the piano. Even the usual coughs, whispers, and shuffles of chairs had vanished. Every person in the hall was holding their breath, leaning forward, completely focused. She had created a connection so deep that it was almost as if the world outside had ceased to exist. For those few minutes, there was only her, the piano, and the music that moved through them all. A woman near the front clasped her hands tightly, tears running down her face. She didn't try to hide it. She didn't need to. The emotions in the music were undeniable. A young boy sitting next to her whispered softly, "It's beautiful," though his voice was nearly lost in the sound of the piano. Around the room, similar reactions rippled silently. People were touched in ways they could not fully explain. Caught off guard by the raw honesty of the performance, she had reached the climax of the piece. The notes were powerful now, each one striking with clarity and intention. The melody soared, rising and falling in waves, carrying with it a depth of emotion that was impossible to ignore. Her fingers flew across the keys, yet every note remained precise, deliberate, and full of feeling. The audience could feel the effort, the mastery, and the heart behind each sound. Even he, the seasoned critic, could not help but lean forward, eyes fixed, mouth slightly open in astonishment. He had been wrong to dismiss her. He had judged too quickly, and now he understood the folly of that judgment. This was not just a young woman playing a piano. This was a force of nature, a presence that commanded attention, respect, and awe. He scribbled something in his notebook, though the words felt inadequate, extraordinary, beyond expectation, completely underestimated. The energy in the room was palpable. The music seemed to wrap around every listener, filling them with a mixture of excitement, reverence, and wonder. Some people closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, while others stared at the performer, unable to believe the talent before them. Every person felt the same truth. They were witnessing something rare, something that would stay with them forever. She did not pause, did not falter. Her focus was absolute. She was not thinking about the audience, about the reactions, about the praise or the criticism. She was fully immersed in the music, fully present, fully herself. And that authenticity was what made her performance so powerful. The audience was not just hearing the notes. They were feeling her journey, her heart, her story. The complexity of the final section was breathtaking. She wove layers of sound together, shifting seamlessly between soft, gentle passages and strong, commanding chords. Each note resonated, each pause carried weight. She was telling a story of struggle, of hope, of triumph, without ever saying a word. The audience could sense it. They were living it with her, moment by moment, note by note. He noticed the subtle changes in her expression. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, a quiet smile forming as if she were sharing a secret with the piano. She was not performing for recognition. She was performing for the music itself. And in doing so, she had captured the hearts of everyone in the room. Even those who had been skeptical, those who had doubted her, could not help but be moved. The music rose to its final crescendo, a series of notes that were both powerful and delicate, precise yet full of emotion. Her hands moved with confidence and grace, each key pressed with intention, each chord carrying meaning. The hall seemed to vibrate with the sound, as if the music itself had taken on a physical presence, filling every corner, every seat, every listener. Then, with a final, lingering note, she paused. The sound hung in the air, resonating in the hearts of everyone present. For a moment, there was complete silence. No one moved, no one breathed audibly, as if the room collectively held its breath, not wanting to disturb the magic of the moment. And then, slowly, it happened. The applause began. At first, it was hesitant, soft, almost shy, as people processed what they had just experienced. But it quickly grew, spreading through the hall like a wave. Hands clapped, feet stomped softly, voices cheered. The audience was no longer passive. They were active participants in celebrating the extraordinary. Some people stood, some wiped away tears, others simply smiled, unable to fully articulate the emotions they felt. He rose from his seat, almost instinctively, joining the growing wave of appreciation. He could not contain his astonishment. He had underestimated her, and now he was overwhelmed by the realization of just how wrong he had been. The performance had surpassed every expectation, defied every assumption, and left a lasting impression on everyone in the room. People shouted words of admiration, some calling out her name, others simply expressing awe. The young boy near the front clapped with vigor, his eyes wide and sparkling. The older woman clasped her hands again, her face lit with joy and wonder. Even the staff backstage peeked out, unable to resist witnessing the final moments of the performance. The hall was alive with energy, a collective acknowledgement of the talent that had just been revealed. She slowly lifted her hands from the keys, her expression calm, almost serene. She had completed her story, her journey, her gift to the room. She looked up briefly, taking in the reaction, but did not seek approval. She did not need it. The performance had spoken for her, louder and clearer than any words ever could. He scribbled one final note in his notebook, feeling the inadequacy of language in the face of what he had witnessed. This is rare. This is talent. This is authenticity. Underestimated completely. He looked around the room, seeing the impact she had made on every face, every person, every soul present. He knew, without a doubt, that this was a moment that would remain with him forever. The applause continued, echoing in the hall, a tribute not just to the music, but to the performer who had defied expectation. She had proven that appearances can be deceiving, that talent can come quietly and unexpectedly, and that true artistry touches the heart, not just the ears. The audience had been astonished, moved, and inspired, and the effect of her performance would linger far beyond the walls of that auditorium. The applause gradually faded, leaving behind a quiet sense of awe that lingered in the room. The audience sat, some still in shock, others whispering softly to themselves, as if trying to process what they had just experienced. It was not just a performance they had witnessed. It was an awakening, a reminder of what music could truly be when played with heart, dedication, and authenticity. She remained at the piano, her hands resting gently on the keys, eyes closed, taking a deep breath. The room was still buzzing, but she did not let it distract her. She had given everything she had in those few minutes, and the energy of the audience reflected the connection she had created. It was a moment that could not be measured by applause or recognition. It was a moment that existed in the shared experience between her and every listener. He stood in his seat, notebook clutched in hand, unable to move at first. He had seen countless performances, evaluated hundreds of musicians, and yet nothing had affected him this way. He realized, with a mix of humility and amazement, that he had been completely wrong in his first judgment. The quiet, unassuming young woman he had dismissed had shown a level of talent, control, and emotion that few could ever reach. He felt a deep respect for her, one that went beyond professional acknowledgement. Round the hall, people began to rise from their seats, some moving closer to offer congratulations, others simply standing in silent admiration. The energy of the room had shifted completely. What had started as a normal talent showcase had transformed into a moment of shared humanity, a collective recognition of dedication, courage, and artistry. People who had doubted, who had whispered skeptically, now found themselves smiling, nodding, and even wiping away tears. The organizers approached, their faces filled with excitement and admiration. They had seen many talented performers before, but there was something extraordinary about her. They offered words of praise, smiles, and handshakes, but she accepted them quietly, almost shyly, with a gentle nod. She did not need recognition. She had already expressed herself fully through the music. Still, the validation from others felt earned, not demanded. He finally made his way toward the stage. Every step felt surreal. He had wanted to critique, to analyze, to judge, but now, words felt insufficient. When he reached her, he paused for a moment, unsure how to begin. She looked up, her eyes calm, welcoming, yet fully aware of the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath and extended his hand. "I underestimated you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "That was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary." She smiled, a quiet, humble smile, and simply nodded. She did not need to say anything further. Her music had already spoken for her, yet his words seemed to acknowledge the journey she had undertaken, the years of effort, the countless hours of practice, and the courage to share it with the world. Others began to gather round, offering congratulations, asking questions, and expressing admiration. She remained composed, accepting each compliment with grace and humility. It was clear that she had not performed for recognition or applause. She had performed because she loved the music, because it was part of her, because it was the only way she could express what she felt inside, and that authenticity resonated far more deeply than any outward display ever could. He watched her interact with the audience, noticing the quiet confidence she carried, She did not boast, she did not exaggerate, she did not seek to impress. She simply shared herself, piece by piece, through the language of music, and in doing so, she inspired everyone around her, reminding them that true talent often comes quietly, unexpectedly, and without warning. The audience began to disperse slowly, yet the energy lingered. Conversations buzzed with excitement and wonder. People recounted specific moments of the performance, describing how her hands moved, how the music made them feel, how it seemed to reach into parts of them they had long forgotten. The impact was undeniable. Even those who had been initially skeptical could not stop talking about her. She had left a mark on everyone in the room outside the hall. A small crowd had gathered, curious to see the performer who had created such a stir. Reporters, students, and local music enthusiasts asked questions, eager to understand her story. She spoke with the same quiet humility she had carried on stage, explaining that she had practiced for years, often alone, driven by her love for music rather than a desire for recognition. Her words were simple, yet filled with sincerity, and they only added to the admiration that people felt. He returned to his seat briefly, reflecting on everything he had witnessed. He had judged her within seconds of seeing her, assuming she would be ordinary, perhaps even forgettable. And yet, she had proven him completely wrong. He felt a profound respect for her dedication, her courage, and her ability to connect with the audience in such a deep, meaningful way. It was a reminder that talent could not be measured by appearances, and that true artistry is recognized by its impact, not its presentation. Days after the performance, her story began to spread. Invitations arrived from music schools, local orchestras, and even national competitions. People who had attended the showcase shared their experience, describing the young woman who had transformed a simple performance into an unforgettable moment of beauty and emotion. She became an inspiration, not because she sought fame, but because she had reminded everyone of the power of dedication, authenticity, and passion. Even he, the critic, could not help but write about the experience. His review, usually critical and detached, became a heartfelt acknowledgement of her talent. He described the precision of her fingers, the emotion in her playing, and the way she had captivated every person in the room. He admitted his mistake in underestimating her and praised her for a performance that went beyond technical skill, reaching into the very essence of music itself. She continued to practice and perform, not for fame or accolades, but for the love of the music. Each performance was an opportunity to share a piece of herself with others, to connect in a way that words could not achieve. And each time she played, she remembered the moment when she first walked onto that stage, quiet and unassuming, yet capable of astonishing an entire audience. It was a memory that grounded her, reminding her why she played, why she practiced, and why she shared her talent. Her journey became an example for others. Young musicians who felt overlooked or underestimated saw her as proof that dedication and authenticity could overcome doubt and skepticism. They learned that talent does not need to be loud to be powerful, that humility does not diminish skill, and that true artistry speaks for itself. Her story inspired countless people to continue pursuing their passions, even when others did not believe in them. He often thought back to that day, to the quiet woman who had walked onto the stage and transformed the room with her music. He realized that he had not just witnessed a performance. He had witnessed a lesson in humility, respect, and the power of human expression. It reminded him why he had entered the world of music critique in the first place: to witness, to learn, and to appreciate the rare moments when talent transcends expectation. The memory of that performance stayed with him for years. Whenever he felt cynical, or jaded, or doubtful, he thought of her, and the way she had moved an entire audience with nothing but her hands, her heart, and the piano. He often shared the story with students, colleagues, and friends, describing the moment when a quiet, underestimated performer reminded everyone present that appearances could be deceiving, and that true talent always shines through. She never sought to overshadow anyone or to claim the spotlight for herself. Her goal was simply to play, to share, and to inspire. Yet, in doing so, she left a mark that would not fade. She had proven that talent, when combined with passion and sincerity, could astonish even the most critical observers. She had reminded the world that human expression, genuine and heartfelt, could create moments of lasting beauty that no judgment, expectation, or skepticism could diminish. In the years that followed, her performances continued to touch hearts. Each time she played, she carried with her the memory of that first astonishing performance, the audience that had been captivated, and the critic who had underestimated her. She knew that the power of music lay not in applause or recognition, but in its ability to connect, to inspire, and to awaken something deeper in every listener. Her story became a legend in the local music community, shared again and again as an example of perseverance, humility, and the quiet strength of talent that refuses to be ignored. People spoke not just of her technical skill, but of the authenticity she brought to every note, the emotion she conveyed, and the courage it took to share her gift with the world. Her journey inspired countless others to believe in themselves. Even when the odds seemed against them, he often returned to that memory in his own life, reminded that assumptions could be dangerous, and that the quiet, unassuming, and underestimated could sometimes achieve the most extraordinary feats. He understood, more clearly than ever, that true greatness was not always loud or obvious, but could be found in moments of dedication, humility, and unwavering authenticity. And so, the young woman continued to play, to inspire, and to astonish. She had walked onto a simple stage, underestimated by many, and yet she had left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of every